February 1st, 2026, Tucson, Arizona. An 84-year-old woman goes to bed in her quiet, upscale neighborhood, her pacemaker syncing with her iPhone for the last time at 2:30 a.m. By morning, Nancy Guthrie is gone. Her front door is wide open. A trail of blood leads from her porch into the darkness. Security cameras capture a masked figure at her door. And despite one of the most intensive searches in Arizona history, involving up to 100 FBI agents, advanced technology, and a reward exceeding $1 million, Nancy Guthrie has not been found. Now, 32 days later, investigators are focusing their efforts on the vast Arizona desert surrounding Tucson. Using cutting-edge signal detection technology, they are searching for the electronic signature of Nancy's pacemaker. They believe that if Nancy is out there, if her body was taken into the desert and left among the rocks and cactus and endless sand, her pacemaker may still be transmitting, and that signal could lead them directly to her. This is the story of Nancy Guthrie, the mother of Today Show anchor Savannah Guthrie, a beloved grandmother, retired realtor, and pillar of her community. A woman who vanished from her own home in the middle of the night, leaving behind only blood and questions. A case that has gripped the nation and left investigators following a trail that leads deep into the unforgiving Arizona desert. Before we dive deeper into this investigation, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Here at Forensic Disconnect, we unlock the cases that deserve to be remembered. New investigations every week. Nancy Guthrie was born on March 27, 1941. She was 84 years old at the time of her disappearance. Nancy lived in Tucson, Arizona, in a neighborhood on the city's northwest side known as Rancho Vistoso. The area is upscale and quiet, the kind of place where residents feel safe, where homes are well maintained, and where violent crime is rare. Nancy had lived in Tucson for decades. She was a retired realtor who had built a life in the community. She was a mother to two daughters, Savannah Guthrie, the well-known co-anchor of NBC's Today Show, and Annie Guthrie Caldwell. She was a grandmother who adored her grandchildren, and she was an independent, active woman who, despite her age, lived alone and managed her own affairs. Nancy's relationship with her daughter Savannah was close. Savannah has spoken publicly about her mother over the years, describing her as loving, strong, and deeply involved in her grandchildren's lives. Nancy would travel to visit Savannah and her family in New York. Savannah would return to Tucson to spend time with her mother. They spoke regularly on the phone. Nancy was proud of her daughter's success and was a constant presence in her life. But living in Tucson, thousands of miles away from Savannah's life in New York, Nancy was also very much on her own in her day-to-day existence. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, everything seemed normal. Nancy was at home. She went about her evening routine. She went to bed. Her home, like many in the neighborhood, was equipped with security cameras and a Ring doorbell. Her pacemaker, a medical device implanted in her chest to regulate her heartbeat, was synced to her iPhone, as it always was. The pacemaker transmitted data to the phone regularly, allowing doctors to monitor Nancy's heart health remotely. At 2:30 a.m. on February 1st, 2026, Nancy's pacemaker synced with her iPhone for what would be the last time. Shortly after that moment, something happened. Something that would lead to Nancy's disappearance and a massive investigation that continues to this day. When the sun rose on the morning of February 1st, Nancy Guthrie was gone. Her front door was found wide open. Blood was discovered on her front porch and along the walkway leading away from the house. Nancy's car was still in the driveway. Her purse and keys were inside the home. There were no signs that she had left voluntarily. The blood, the open door, the fact that Nancy, an 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker, had vanished in the middle of the night, all pointed to one conclusion: something terrible had happened. A family member discovered that Nancy was missing and immediately contacted authorities. The Pima County Sheriff's Department responded. What they found at the scene was deeply troubling. The blood on the porch indicated that there had been violence. The open door suggested that Nancy had either been taken from the home or had fled. But an 84-year-old woman with a heart condition does not simply wander off in the middle of the night. And the evidence suggested she had not left willingly. Investigators quickly classified Nancy's disappearance as suspicious. The FBI was called in, and within hours, a massive search effort was underway. The initial search focused on Nancy's immediate neighborhood. Law enforcement officers, FBI agents, and search and rescue teams combed through the area. They knocked on doors, interviewed neighbors, and reviewed security camera footage from homes and businesses in the vicinity. They searched yards, parks, and any location where Nancy might have been taken or where she might have gone. And as they reviewed the security footage, they made a chilling discovery. Ring camera footage from Nancy's own doorbell captured an image that would become central to the investigation. The footage showed a figure approaching Nancy's front door in the early morning hours of February 1st. The figure was a man, and he was wearing a mask that obscured his face. But despite the mask, certain details were visible. He appeared to be wearing a gun holster on his hip. He carried what looked like an Ozark Trail backpack, a brand sold at Walmart. His eyebrows were visible above the mask. He appeared to have a mustache. He was wearing what looked like a pinky ring on one hand. His clothing and his posture, his build and his movements, all of these details were captured on camera. The FBI released still images from the footage to the public, asking for help in identifying the man. They described him as very identifiable despite the mask, and expressed confidence that someone who knew this man would recognize him. The masked man's appearance at Nancy's door raised immediate questions. Who was he? Why was he there? Was he acting alone? Or were there others involved? And most importantly, what had he done to Nancy Guthrie? Investigators began to build a timeline of events. Based on the pacemaker data, Nancy's device had last synced with her iPhone at 2:30 a.m. The masked man was captured on camera around that same time. Putting these pieces together, investigators believed that Nancy had been taken from her home in the very early hours of February 1st, likely between 2:30 and 3 a.m. But where had she been taken? That question would lead investigators to focus their search on the desert. Tucson, Arizona is surrounded by desert. The Sonoran Desert stretches for miles in every direction, a landscape of sand, rock, cactus, and scrub brush. It is a harsh environment, beautiful in its own way, but unforgiving. Temperatures during the day can soar above 100 degrees, even in the winter months. At night, it is cold. The terrain is difficult to navigate, with rocky outcroppings, steep washes, and thick vegetation. It is also a place where, if someone wanted to hide something or someone, they could do so relatively easily. The desert is vast, and much of it is uninhabited. A body left in the desert could remain undiscovered for days, weeks, or even longer. Investigators began to focus on the desert for several reasons. First, there was the pacemaker data. Cell tower records indicated that Nancy's pacemaker had last transmitted its signal from a location consistent with her home, but the specific cell tower coordinates also suggested a direction of travel. If Nancy had been taken in a vehicle, the path of that vehicle could be partially tracked using cell tower data. While the data was not precise enough to pinpoint an exact location, it suggested an area, and that area was toward the desert. Second, there was physical evidence. On February 11th, 10 days after Nancy's disappearance, a couple walking in the desert approximately 1 mile from Nancy's home made a disturbing discovery. They found a black glove lying on the ground. The glove appeared to be ripped or torn, and there was what looked like blood on the wrist area and on the pointer finger. The couple immediately reported their find to authorities. The glove was collected and tested. However, forensic analysis revealed that the blood on the glove did not match Nancy Guthrie. It was not a viable piece of evidence in her case. But the discovery raised the possibility that items connected to Nancy's disappearance might have been discarded in the desert. On February 23rd, volunteers searching the area found a black backpack in the desert. There was immediate speculation that this might be the backpack seen on the masked man in the Ring camera footage. However, investigators quickly determined that the backpack found by volunteers was different from the Ozark Trail backpack the suspect had been carrying. The Pima County Sheriff's Department stated that the backpack did not appear to be a viable lead. But again, the fact that items were being found in the desert suggested that the desert might hold other clues. The decision to intensify searches in the desert was also driven by technology. Nancy's pacemaker, the device that had been monitoring her heart, was still transmitting. Or at least it could be, if Nancy's body was within range of a signal. Pacemakers are electronic devices. They emit signals, and those signals can be detected if you have the right equipment. The Pima County Sheriff's Department, working with a partner agency, deployed what is known as a signal sniffer. This is a specialized device capable of detecting electronic signals, including the specific signature emitted by a pacemaker. The plan was to search areas of the desert where cell tower data suggested Nancy might have been taken, using the signal sniffer to try to pick up any transmission from her pacemaker. Sheriff Chris Nanos spoke to the media about the search efforts. He described the technology being used and the areas being searched. He stated that investigators were focusing on a neighboring county's desert area, though he did not specify which county. The use of cell tower coordinates, combined with the signal sniffer, represented one of the most advanced search efforts in recent memory. If Nancy's body was in the desert, and if her pacemaker was still functional, there was a chance it could be located. But searching the desert is an enormous challenge. The area is vast. The terrain is difficult. Temperatures, even in early February, can be extreme. FBI agents were photographed walking through the desert in the heat, carrying water bottles, navigating around rocks and cactus. Helicopters flew overhead. Cadaver dogs, trained to detect the scent of human remains, were deployed. Drones equipped with thermal imaging cameras scanned the landscape from above. And volunteers, despite being asked by authorities to stay away, continued to search on their own. The volunteer efforts, while well-intentioned, became a source of frustration for law enforcement. Groups such as Madres Buscadoras de Sonora, an organization dedicated to searching for missing persons, mobilized to help look for Nancy. Community members armed with shovels and a determination to find her combed through areas of the desert. But their presence raised concerns. Sheriff Nanos publicly asked volunteers to give investigators space. He explained that while the concern was appreciated, volunteer searchers could inadvertently contaminate potential crime scenes, destroy evidence, or distract resources by finding items that were not actually connected to the case. Every item found by volunteers had to be collected, logged, and tested, even if it ultimately turned out to be unrelated. The glove and the backpack were perfect examples. Both had required time and resources to investigate, and both had turned out to be dead ends. As the search in the desert intensified, forensic experts began to weigh in on what investigators might expect to find if Nancy's body was indeed out there. Joe Scott Morgan, a forensic expert and host of the Body Bags podcast, discussed the specific conditions of the Arizona desert and how they affect human remains. He explained that while many people assume that the dry climate of the desert would lead to perfect preservation of a body, the reality is more complex. The lack of humidity does lead to desiccation, which is the drying out of tissue. This process can result in early mummification, where the skin and soft tissue dry out and harden rather than decomposing in the traditional sense. Morgan noted that early mummification can actually be beneficial from a forensic standpoint. When tissue mummifies, it can preserve evidence of trauma more effectively than if the body had undergone typical decomposition with soft tissue decay. Wounds, fractures, and other injuries may be more visible and easier to analyze on a mummified body. However, the degree of preservation depends on several factors. Was the body left exposed to the elements, or was it buried or covered? Was it placed in an area with some shelter, such as under a rock overhang or in a wash, or was it left completely in the open? These factors would all influence the rate and manner of decomposition or mummification. Morgan also pointed out that the Arizona desert is not without its scavengers. Coyotes, birds, and insects are all present and would be attracted to a body. While he did not go into graphic detail, he acknowledged that scavenger activity could complicate the recovery and analysis of remains. However, he expressed confidence that if Nancy's body was in the desert and was found, forensic investigators would be able to gather significant evidence, even after 32 days. The focus on the desert also led to speculation about why someone would choose the desert as a location to dispose of a body. Several theories emerged. The first, discussed by forensic expert Joe Scott Morgan, was local knowledge. Morgan pointed out that Nancy Guthrie was not a random victim. She was the mother of Savannah Guthrie, one of the most recognizable faces on American television. For someone to target Nancy specifically, they would likely have had foreknowledge of who she was and who her daughter was. And if they had local knowledge, they would also know the area, including the desert. Tucson residents are familiar with the vast stretches of desert that surround the city. Someone with local knowledge would know where to go, how to access remote areas, and how to avoid being seen. The second theory, proposed by former FBI agent Tracy Walder, was that the perpetrator might be someone obsessed with Savannah Guthrie. Walder suggested that Nancy was targeted not because of anything she had done, but because of who her daughter was. Someone upset with Savannah or fixated on her might have decided to harm her by harming her mother. This theory was supported by the apparently targeted nature of the crime. Nancy was an 84-year-old woman living alone. If the motive had been robbery or random violence, there would have been easier targets. The fact that Nancy specifically was taken suggested that there was a reason, and that reason might be connected to Savannah. The third theory, discussed by retired Lieutenant Randy Sutton, was that multiple perpetrators were involved. Sutton analyzed the logistics of the crime. He noted that the masked man captured on camera appeared to have been at the front of Nancy's house, but there was evidence suggesting that someone may have also been at the rear of the property. Floodlights at the back of Nancy's home had been intentionally broken prior to her disappearance, suggesting tactical knowledge and planning. Sutton argued that it would be very difficult for one person acting alone to abduct an 84-year-old woman from her home, transport her, and dispose of her body. He suggested that there was likely a driver involved and possibly others. If multiple people were involved, that would also explain how a body could be taken into the desert and disposed of relatively quickly. As the investigation entered its 5th week, the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI made some adjustments to their approach. The number of FBI agents visibly working in Tucson was reduced. This was not because the case was being deprioritized, but rather because much of the work had shifted to analysis and investigation that did not require a large physical presence in the field. The massive amount of video footage collected from ring cameras, security cameras, and traffic cameras in the area was being analyzed at FBI facilities, likely in Phoenix. The task force, which included homicide detectives from the Pima County Sheriff's Department and FBI agents, continued to work around the clock. Sheriff Nanos stated publicly that up to 100 agents and analysts were working on the case. He emphasized that this was not a cold case. It was, in the words of former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, a red-hot case. Coffindaffer, who has extensive experience with the FBI, pushed back against media reports suggesting that the case might be going cold. She explained that a cold case is one where all leads have been exhausted, where there is nothing left to investigate, and where the case is essentially dormant until new information emerges. Nancy Guthrie's case was the polar opposite. There were active leads being pursued. There was evidence being analyzed. There were agents working on it every single day. The fact that an arrest had not yet been made did not mean the investigation was stalled. It meant that investigators were building a case carefully and thoroughly. On March 2nd, Sheriff Chris Nanos gave an interview to NBC in which he expressed confidence in the investigation's progress. He stated that he believed investigators were definitely closer to solving the case. He said that he had full faith and full confidence that the case would be solved. And in a statement that surprised some observers, he said that he personally believed Nancy Guthrie was still alive. Nanos clarified that this was his personal belief, not necessarily the official position of the investigation, but he said that he was hopeful. Whether this belief was based on specific evidence or simply on optimism is unclear, but the statement offered a glimmer of hope to a public that had largely assumed the worst. That same weekend, Savannah Guthrie made a visit to her mother's home in Tucson. Accompanied by her sister Annie and Annie's husband, Savannah placed flowers and a card at the growing memorial outside Nancy's house. The card, which was photographed by media, read, "Though we are surrounded by so much darkness and uncertainty, our love burns bright. We love you, Mommy. We miss you so much." The image of Savannah, one of the most poised and professional figures in broadcast journalism, standing at her mother's home in obvious grief was heartbreaking. Savannah has largely remained private throughout the investigation, making only a few public statements. On her Instagram account, she thanked the public for their prayers and asked people to continue hoping. She also confirmed that the $1 million reward offered by the family could be paid in cash, a detail that some hoped might incentivize someone with information to come forward. The reward for information leading to Nancy's recovery or to an arrest and conviction has grown to approximately $1.2 million. The breakdown is as follows: $1 million from the Guthrie family, $100,000 from the FBI, and over $100,000 from the 88 Crime Tip Line. It is one of the largest rewards ever offered in a missing person case in Arizona. And yet, despite the enormous sum, despite the public attention, despite the involvement of the FBI and local law enforcement, no one has come forward with information that has led to Nancy being found. The lack of progress, despite such intensive efforts, raises difficult questions. If Nancy was taken into the desert, as investigators seem to believe, why has the signal sniffer not detected her pacemaker? There are several possible explanations. First, the desert is vast. Even with cell tower data providing a general area, the specific location could be anywhere within many square miles. The signal sniffer has a range, but it is not unlimited. If Nancy's body is in a location that has not yet been searched, the signal would not be detected. Second, the pacemaker may no longer be functional. While pacemakers are designed to last for years, they are powered by batteries. If the battery has died, or if the device has been damaged in some way, it would no longer emit a signal. Third, If Nancy's body was buried or covered with rocks or debris, the signal might be blocked or weakened to the point where it cannot be detected. There is also the possibility, though investigators have not publicly stated this, that Nancy was not taken to the desert at all. The focus on the desert is based on cell tower data and on the logic that the desert is a likely disposal site for someone with local knowledge. But it is possible that the perpetrator or perpetrators took Nancy somewhere else entirely. She could have been taken to a different county, to a remote building or structure, or even across state lines. Without more concrete evidence, investigators are working with the best information they have, but that does not mean their assumptions are necessarily correct. As of today, March 4th, 2026, 32 days after Nancy Guthrie vanished from her Tucson home, she has not been found. The masked man captured on her Ring camera has not been identified. No arrests have been made. The investigation remains active, with dozens of agents and detectives continuing to pursue leads. The desert searches continue, though they have been scaled back from the initial intensive efforts. The Guthrie family continues to wait, hoping for news, hoping for closure, hoping that somehow their mother and grandmother will be found. For Savannah Guthrie, this ordeal has played out in the most public way imaginable. As a co-anchor of one of the most watched morning shows in America, Savannah is a household name. Her professionalism, her warmth, and her journalistic integrity have made her a beloved figure. But now she is not a journalist covering a story. She is a daughter whose mother is missing. She has had to balance her public role with her private grief. She has had to continue showing up to work, smiling on camera, interviewing guests, all while knowing that her mother is out there somewhere, and that every day that passes makes it less likely that she will be found alive. The strength that Savannah has shown throughout this nightmare is remarkable, but it is also a reminder of the human cost of these tragedies. This is not just a news story. This is a family that has been torn apart. The case has also had a profound impact on the Tucson community. The neighborhood where Nancy lived, once a place where residents felt safe, is now a place where people lock their doors more carefully, where they look over their shoulders, where they wonder if the person who did this is still out there. The fact that an 84-year-old woman could be violently taken from her home in the middle of the night is terrifying. It shatters the sense of security that people expect in their own homes, and it raises questions about how such a thing could happen without anyone seeing or hearing anything. There are many unanswered questions in this case. Who was the masked man? Why was Nancy targeted? Was he acting alone, or were there others involved? What happened to Nancy after she was taken from her home? Is she still alive, as Sheriff Nanos hopes, or is her body somewhere in the vast Arizona desert waiting to be found? And if she is out there, will the technology being used to search for her pacemaker signal lead investigators to her, or will the desert keep its secrets? One of the most chilling aspects of this case is the premeditation that appears to have been involved. The floodlights at the back of Nancy's house were broken beforehand, suggesting that someone had cased the property. The masked man's appearance, with a gun holster and a backpack, suggests that he came prepared. The timing, in the very early morning hours when Nancy would be asleep, and when neighbors would be unlikely to see anything, suggests planning. This was not a random act of violence. This was calculated. And that makes it all the more terrifying. The use of advanced technology in the search for Nancy is both impressive and sobering. The fact that investigators can use a signal sniffer to search for the electronic signature of a pacemaker is remarkable. It demonstrates the lengths to which law enforcement will go to find a missing person. But it also highlights the challenges they face. Even with cutting-edge technology, even with dozens of agents, even with a reward of over $1 million, Nancy Guthrie has not been found. The desert is simply too vast. The variables are too many. And the person or persons responsible have so far managed to evade detection. For the Guthrie family, the waiting is unbearable. Every day that passes without news is another day of uncertainty and pain. They have put up the reward. They have made public appeals. They have cooperated fully with investigators. And they continue to hope. But as the days turn into weeks, and the weeks threaten to turn into months, that hope becomes harder to maintain. They want their mother back. They want to know what happened. They want justice, and they want closure, even if that closure comes in the form of the worst possible news. The FBI has asked anyone with information about Nancy's disappearance to come forward. Tips can be submitted anonymously. The reward is substantial, and yet, the person or persons responsible have remained silent. This suggests either that they are acting alone and have told no one, or that those who know something are too afraid to speak up. It is possible that the masked man is known to people in the community, but that those people have not recognized him from the Ring camera footage, or that they have recognized him but are unwilling to come forward. It is also possible that the answers to what happened to Nancy are known only to the perpetrators themselves, and that they have no intention of revealing the truth. As the investigation continues, there is hope that forensic evidence will provide a breakthrough. The DNA that was found inside Nancy's house, which appears to be mixed DNA from multiple sources, is still being analyzed. It has been submitted to CODIS, the FBI's DNA database, but so far there have been no hits. This means that the DNA does not match anyone already in the system. However, there is the possibility of using investigative genetic genealogy, a technique that has been used to solve cold cases by tracing DNA through family trees. If the DNA sample is of sufficient quality, and if the person who left it has relatives who have submitted their DNA to genealogy databases, it may be possible to identify them. This process takes time, but it has proven to be remarkably effective in recent years. There is also the possibility that the investigation will be solved through more traditional means. Someone may come forward with information. A witness may remember seeing something that seemed insignificant at the time, but that turns out to be crucial. A piece of evidence may be found that connects a suspect to the crime. Or investigators may trace one of the vehicles that was seen on Ring camera footage in the area around 2:30 a.m. on the morning of Nancy's disappearance. The FBI is reviewing footage of approximately a dozen vehicles that passed through the neighborhood during that time window. Each vehicle is being tracked down. Each owner is being interviewed. It is painstaking work, but it is the kind of work that solves cases. The case of Nancy Guthrie is a reminder of how vulnerable we all are. We lock our doors. We install security systems. We do everything we can to feel safe in our own homes, and yet, safety is never guaranteed. An 84-year-old woman living in a good neighborhood with cameras and alarms was still taken. It is a sobering reality, and it is a reality that investigators are working tirelessly to address, not just for Nancy and her family, but for the community and for anyone else who might be at risk. If you have any information about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, please contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department or the FBI. Tips can be submitted to the 88 Crime Tip Line. You can remain anonymous. A reward of over $1 million is available for information that leads to Nancy's recovery or to an arrest and conviction. Every piece of information, no matter how small it may seem, could be the key to solving this case. Nancy Guthrie is someone's mother, someone's grandmother, someone's friend. She deserves to be found. Her family deserves answers. And the person or persons responsible deserve to be held accountable. Thank you for watching this investigation. If you found this coverage informative and respectful, please subscribe to Forensic Disconnect for more in-depth investigations into cases that deserve to be remembered. Hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below, but please keep your comments respectful. What do you think happened to Nancy Guthrie? Do you believe she could still be alive? Do you think the desert searches will lead to answers? Let us know. And remember, this is not just a story. This is a real woman, a real family, and a real ongoing tragedy. Nancy Guthrie deserves to be found. Her story deserves to be told. And the truth, wherever it may be, deserves to be brought into the light.